The hum of quantum stabilizers filled the air as Thalia Reeves adjusted her instruments in the New Geneva Science Center. The Interstellar Science Summit was about to begin, and as Earth's leading quantum resonance researcher, she couldn't afford any distractions. Yet her hands trembled slightly as she calibrated the final settings on her presentation display. The Etherians were attending this year. After decades of distant observation, the enigmatic species had finally agreed to participate in the summit. Known for their remarkable empathic abilities and advanced understanding of consciousness-based technologies, they represented everything Thalia had spent her career studying from afar. "Dr. Reeves," a soft voice interrupted her thoughts, "your presentation begins in 10 minutes." Thalia turned to thank her assistant, Julian, but the words caught in her throat. Behind him stood an Etherian, tall and graceful with iridescent skin that seemed to capture and reflect the ambient light in mesmerizing patterns. His eyes were deep violet, with subtle rings of silver that shifted like liquid mercury. "I am Nixon," the Etherian said, his voice carrying an otherworldly resonance that made the air itself seem to vibrate. "Lead researcher in consciousness transmission. I hope I'm not interrupting, but I found your paper on quantum consciousness entanglement fascinating." Thalia straightened her lab coat, trying to maintain her professional composure. "Not at all. I'm honored you took the time to read it." She gestured to her display. "I'm actually presenting an expansion of that research today." Nixon moved closer, and Thalia felt a subtle shift in the air between them, like the moment before lightning strikes. All Etherians were natural empaths, capable of sensing and influencing emotions through a kind of psychic resonance. Their abilities were carefully controlled through rigorous training, but their mere presence could affect sensitive individuals. "Your theories about consciousness as a quantum phenomenon align remarkably with our understanding," Nixon said, studying her display with evident interest. "Though we approach it from a different perspective." "That's exactly why I hope to meet an Etherian researcher," Thalia said, her earlier nervousness giving way to scientific curiosity. "Your species' natural empathic abilities suggest consciousness operates on principles we're only beginning to understand." As she reached to adjust the display, her hand brushed against Nixon's. The contact lasted less than a second, but the effect was immediate and overwhelming. A surge of sensation flooded through her, not physical pleasure, but a rush of pure emotional resonance that made her gasp. Colors seemed brighter, sounds sharper, and she could swear she felt the quantum fluctuations she spent her career studying. Nixon stepped back immediately, his silver rings expanding in apparent concern. "I apologize, even brief contact can be intense for humans. Are you all right?" Thalia steadied herself against the display console, her mind racing to process what had happened. The sensation hadn't been uncomfortable, quite the opposite. It felt like completing a circuit she hadn't known was broken, like finding the missing frequency in a complex harmony. "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice shook slightly. "That was unexpected. Is that how your empathic abilities normally manifest?" Nixon's expression shifted to one of puzzlement. "No, usually the effect is much more subtle, especially through incidental contact." He studied her with renewed interest. "Your response was unique, almost as if." The room's warning chime interrupted him, signaling 5 minutes until the presentation. Julian, who had been hovering nervously nearby, cleared his throat. "Dr. Reeves, we should prepare to begin." "Of course," Thalia straightened, trying to focus on the task at hand. "Will you be attending the presentation, Nixon?" "I wouldn't miss it," he said, those mercury rings still swirling with curiosity. "Perhaps we could discuss your experience afterward, over dinner if you're willing." Thalia knew she should probably decline. The incident with their touch suggested there was something unusual about their interaction, something that might complicate both their research and diplomatic relations. But her scientific curiosity, and something else she wasn't ready to name, wouldn't let her refuse. "I'd like that," she said, managing a small smile. "There's a quiet restaurant in the diplomatic quarter, less chance of accidental contact with others." As Nixon nodded and moved to take his seat in the audience, Thalia tried to focus on her presentation. but her mind kept returning to that moment of contact, to the sensation of completeness it had brought. She had spent her career studying quantum consciousness, theorizing about the fundamental nature of awareness and connection. Now, standing on the precipice of something both thrilling and dangerous, she wondered if she was about to discover just how right or wrong her theories had been. The lights dimmed, and Thalia took her place at the podium. As she began her presentation on quantum consciousness entanglement, she was acutely aware of Nixon's presence in the audience. His attention felt like a gentle current in the air, a reminder of the mystery they had stumbled upon together. She couldn't know then that their brief touch had set in motion events that would challenge both their world's understanding of consciousness, connection, and the very nature of what it meant to be human or Etherian. As she spoke about quantum entanglement and consciousness, she was already becoming entangled in something far more complex than mere scientific theory. The future stretched before them, full of promise and danger, discovery and choice. But for now, there was only the hum of quantum stabilizers, the gentle resonance of Nixon's presence, and the lingering echo of a touch that had changed everything. Thalia stared at the neural scan results floating before her in holographic detail. 2 weeks had passed since her presentation at the summit, and she hadn't left the research facility since. Neither had Nixon. Their dinner plans had been interrupted by the arrival of both Earth security and Etherian diplomatic corps representatives, all extremely interested in what had happened during their brief contact. "The patterns are unlike anything we've seen before," Julian said, manipulating the display to highlight specific areas of neural activity. "Your brain's quantum signature has been permanently altered by the contact." Nixon stood on the other side of the room, maintaining the careful distance they'd been ordered to keep. His iridescent skin seemed dimmer in the harsh laboratory lighting, but his eyes remained fixed on Thalia with an intensity that made her breath catch. "It's not just her neural patterns," he said, his resonant voice carrying that slight vibration that made everything in the room hum in sympathy. "My own resonance has shifted. It's as if we're tuned to the same frequency now," Thalia finished, earning a sharp look from Dr. Marcus, the Earth Security Science Advisor who'd been assigned to monitor their case. "That's precisely what concerns us," Marcus said, making notes on his tablet. "We have no precedent for this kind of neural synchronization between humans and Etherians. The potential implications for security are precisely why we need to understand it," Thalia interrupted. She gestured at the neural scans. "Look at these patterns. The quantum entanglement isn't just stable, it's self-reinforcing. We could be on the verge of understanding consciousness itself. Or on the verge of compromising Earth's diplomatic position," Marcus countered. "The Etherian High Council is already demanding answers about why one of their ambassadors has been corrupted by human contact." Nixon's silver eye rings flared at that. "I haven't been corrupted. I've been enlightened. What Thalia and I experienced. It's something my people have theorized about for generations, the perfect resonance." Thalia felt a flutter in her chest at his words. Over the past 2 weeks, even with the enforced distance between them, she had become increasingly aware of his presence. It was like having a new sense she couldn't quite name, an awareness of his emotions, his thoughts, his very essence. "We need to conduct more tests," she said, trying to keep her voice professional despite the longing she felt to move closer to him. "Controlled experiments to understand the nature of this connection." "Agreed," Marcus said, though his expression remained skeptical. "But under strict supervision, we can't risk any further incidents." Later that evening, after most of the staff had left, Thalia sat in her private research room, reviewing the day's data. The door chimed softly, and she knew without looking that it was Nixon. "Come in," she called, and he entered, followed by the ever-present security drone that monitored their interactions. "I brought you something," he said, placing a small device on her desk. It looked like a crystal, but it pulsed with an inner light that matched the rhythm of her heartbeat. "It's an Etherian meditation focus. It might help you understand what's happening to us." Thalia picked up the crystal, gasping softly as it warmed to her touch. The pulsing light synchronized perfectly with the new awareness she felt of Nixon's presence. "It's beautiful," she whispered. But won't you get in trouble for sharing Etherian technology? It's not technology, he said, smiling slightly. It's art, a representation of what we call the soul song, the unique resonance each being carries within them. He paused, those mercury rings in his eyes swirling. Yours has become part of mine. The security drone beeped a warning as they drew slightly closer together, and they both stepped back reflexively. But the connection between them remained, humming like a perfectly tuned string. I've been thinking, Thalia said, careful to keep her voice low. The quantum entanglement patterns, they're not random. They're forming a specific configuration, like a key fitting into a lock that's always existed. Nixon nodded. On my world, there are ancient texts that speak of this, the joining of resonances across species. But it was considered myth, a romantic fancy from before we developed our scientific understanding. What if it wasn't myth? Thalia asked, her scientist's mind racing with possibilities. What if evolution itself has been working toward this kind of connection, a bridge between different forms of consciousness? A dangerous theory, Nixon said, but his eyes shone with excitement. One that could threaten everything both our peoples believe about themselves. Truth often does, Thalia replied, turning the crystal in her hands. Its light seemed to reach out toward Nixon, creating patterns in the air between them that the security drone couldn't detect. They worked late into the night, separately but together, each feeling the other's presence like a song just out of hearing. Their research continued, documented and monitored, but the real discoveries happened in these quiet moments, in shared glances, in the way the air itself seemed to dance between them, in the growing certainty that they had stumbled upon something both wonderful and terrible. As Thalia finally prepared to sleep in her temporary quarters, she placed the crystal beside her bed. Its soft light pulsed in time with two heartbeats now, hers and Nixon's, a duet played across quantum strings that science was only beginning to understand. She knew they were being watched, studied, feared. But in the darkness, with only the crystal's light for company, she allowed herself to hope. Whatever was happening between them wasn't just about science or diplomacy. It was about evolution, about the universe finding new ways to know itself. And perhaps, though she barely dared think it, about love transcending the boundaries of worlds and species, resonating in frequencies that no security drone could monitor, no government could control. The emergency alarms jolted Thalia awake at 3 a.m. Red warning lights pulsed through her quarters as Julian's voice came through the intercom. Dr. Reeves, you need to get to the lab immediately. She was already moving, pulled by something beyond the urgency in Julian's voice. Through their quantum connection, she could feel Nixon's concern pulsing like a distant storm. The laboratory was chaos when she arrived. Dr. Marcus stood with a group of Earth security officials, their faces grim as they watched a holographic news broadcast. Nixon was there too, his iridescent skin flickering with patterns she'd learned to recognize as distress. What's happening? She asked, though the answer thrummed through their connection before anyone spoke. The Etherian High Council has recalled all their representatives, Marcus said, his voice tight. They're claiming we've been conducting unauthorized experiments on their people. The news broadcast showed Etherian ships departing Earth's orbital stations, their crystalline hulls catching starlight as they broke atmosphere. The newsreader's voice was carefully neutral. After allegations of human interference with Etherian biological systems, the High Council has suspended all diplomatic relations. They're talking about us, Thalia realized, looking at Nixon. About what happened when we touched. Not just that, Nixon said softly. Through their connection, she felt his struggle to maintain composure. The Council has accessed our research data. They know our resonance is still growing stronger, even without physical contact. Dr. Marcus turned off the broadcast with a sharp gesture. Which is why we need to understand exactly what's happening. Now, before this diplomatic incident becomes a crisis. The next hours were a blur of tests and measurements. They mapped the quantum fields surrounding both Thalia and Nixon, documented the increasing synchronization of their neural patterns, and recorded the subtle ways their presence affected the very fabric of space-time around them. Look at this, Julian said, highlighting a particular data stream. The quantum entanglement isn't just between their consciousness anymore. It's affecting the physical structure of their cells. Thalia felt it. Every moment brought new awareness of Nyxon, not just his emotions or surface thoughts, but deeper things. Memories, dreams, the complex harmonies of his alien consciousness becoming as familiar as her own heartbeat. "We're evolving," she whispered, earning sharp looks from the security team. "Both of us, changing to accommodate this connection." "That's what frightens them," Nyxon said, his voice carrying that resonant hum that now seemed to perfectly complement her own frequency. "Both our peoples, they fear what they can't control." Through their growing bond, Thalia caught glimpses of Etherian society, the rigid hierarchies, the carefully controlled development of empathic abilities, the fear of chaos that drove their every decision. She understood now why their connection terrified the High Council. It represented something unprecedented, unpredictable. "Dr. Reeves," Marcus interrupted her thoughts, "Earth security is considering containing this situation, possibly separating you two until we understand the implications." The mere suggestion sent a shock of pain through their shared consciousness. Thalia stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear clutching at her chest. "That would be a mistake. What's happening between us isn't a security threat, it's an opportunity." She gestured to the data displays surrounding them. "Look at these patterns, the quantum resonance we're generating. It's not just affecting us. It's creating a field effect that could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness, of communication, of reality itself." Through their connection, she felt Nyxon's support, his own scientific curiosity merging with hers. He moved closer, careful to maintain the required physical distance, but their energies reached for each other like intertwining melodies. "She's right," he said. "My people have always believed that consciousness shapes reality. What Thalia and I have discovered. It's proof that different forms of consciousness can harmonize, can evolve together to create something greater than the sum of its parts." Julian, who had been quietly analyzing the data, spoke up. "The resonance field they're generating, it's stable, and it's growing, not just in strength but in complexity." He looked up, his expression a mix of awe and concern. "It's like watching a new form of matter being born." Thalia felt the truth of it in every cell of her being. What had started as an accidental touch had become something profound, a bridge between species, between different ways of experiencing reality. Through their connection, she and Nyxon were learning each other's languages of consciousness, creating a harmony that transcended biological barriers. "We need to share this," she said, looking at Marcus. "Not just the scientific data, but the experience itself. Let people see that this isn't something to fear." Nyxon's consciousness brushed against hers, sharing memories of ancient Etherian prophecies about a time when the barriers between species would fall, when consciousness would flow freely between all sentient beings. She had once dismissed such stories as mysticism. Now she wondered if they were predictions. "It would be dangerous," Marcus warned. "Both our governments are already on edge if we reveal the full extent of what's happening here. Then we might prevent a diplomatic crisis from becoming something worse," Thalia finished. She could feel the tension building in the quantum field around them, mirror of the growing tensions between their worlds. "This connection, it's not just about Nyxon and me anymore. It's about the future of both our species." As if in response to her words, the crystal Nyxon had given her, which she now wore on a chain around her neck, began to pulse with new patterns of light. The quantum field between them shimmered with visible energy, creating delicate fractals in the air that even the security sensors struggled to measure. They stood on the edge of something unprecedented, their shared consciousness reaching out toward possibilities that neither of their species had imagined. The question was no longer whether they could maintain their connection, but whether their worlds were ready for what that connection might reveal. In the quiet space between moments, Thalia and Nyxon's resonance hummed with shared purpose. Whatever came next, they would face it together, their frequencies aligned in perfect harmony against the discord of fear and misunderstanding that threatened to tear their worlds apart. The quantum containment field hummed around Thalia's quarters, a constant reminder of how quickly everything had changed. 1 week after the Etherian withdrawal, Earth security had upgraded their observation to full containment. Only Julian and Dr. Marcus were allowed direct access now. But they couldn't contain what truly mattered. Through their quantum resonance, Thalia felt Nixon's presence more clearly than ever, despite him being held in a separate wing of the facility. Their consciousness danced together across barriers of space and matter, growing stronger with each passing day. "The readings are off the charts," Julian murmured, adjusting his instruments. "The quantum field you're generating, it's affecting everything within a 100-meter radius. Metal, organic matter, even the containment field itself, it's all starting to resonate at your frequency." Thalia watched the data streams flowing across his screens. Through Nixon's understanding, merged now with her own, she saw patterns that her human science had never recognized. "It's not just affecting physical matter," she said. "It's creating a bridge between different states of consciousness." As if to prove her point, she felt Nixon's attention shift, his thoughts reaching for hers with increasing clarity. "They're wrong to fear this," his consciousness whispered through their connection. "What we've discovered, it's what both our species have been evolving toward all along." Dr. Marcus entered, his face drawn with concern. "The Etherian High Council has issued an ultimatum. They're demanding we turn Ambassador Nixon over to them for rehabilitation." The word sent chills through both their connected consciousness. Through Nixon's memories, Thalia saw what rehabilitation meant on his world, the forcible reshaping of consciousness, the breaking of unwanted connections. "That's torture," she said, her voice shaking with shared fear and anger. "You can't let them." "Earth security is considering it," Marcus cut in. "They believe giving in to this demand might prevent further diplomatic deterioration." He paused, studying her with something like sympathy. "They're also concerned about the expanding effect of your quantum resonance. Some believe it could become contagious." Julian looked up from his instruments. "He's right about that part. The field you're generating, it's not just growing stronger. It's becoming more complex, developing patterns that seem almost infectious." Thalia felt Nixon's consciousness surge with excitement at these words. "Show them," he urged through their connection. "Show them what we've learned." She took a deep breath, centering herself in their shared awareness. "Julian, adjust your quantum scanner to frequency band theta 9. As he complied, new patterns appeared on his screens, delicate fractals of energy that pulsed with living light. "This is impossible," he whispered. "These patterns, they're self-organizing, creating new quantum states that shouldn't be stable but somehow are." "Because they're not just quantum states," Thalia explained, feeling Nixon's knowledge flow through her. "They're expressions of consciousness itself, the fundamental language of awareness that both our species have been trying to understand." Through their connection, she and Nixon had discovered something profound. Consciousness wasn't just an emergent property of complex systems. It was a fundamental force of the universe, as basic as gravity or electromagnetism. Their accidental coupling had created a resonance that made this force visible, measurable, and potentially transferable. "Are you saying," Marcus asked slowly, "that this field could actually affect other people's consciousness?" "Not affect," Thalia corrected. "Awaken. Every consciousness, human or Etherian, carries the potential for this kind of connection. We've just found the key to unlocking it." She felt Nixon's approval, his own excitement matching hers. They had moved beyond simple empathic connection into something deeper, a true melding of minds that maintained their individuality while creating something greater than either alone. "That's exactly what both governments are afraid of," Marcus said. "If this spreads, if people start developing these kinds of connections spontaneously, then the barriers between our species would start to fall," Thalia finished. "The fears, the misunderstandings, the need for control, all of it would become meaningless in the face of true understanding." Through their bond, she felt Nixon watching the sunset through his own containment field, the colors more vivid through their shared perception. "We need to show them," his thoughts whispered. "Not tell them. Show them." Understanding flowed between them, a plan forming in their merged consciousness. It was dangerous, perhaps impossible, but they had learned that impossibility was often just a matter of perspective. "Julian," Thalia said carefully, "I need you to measure something specific. The resonance between the quantum containment field and the frequencies we're generating." As Julian adjusted his instruments, she felt Nixon gathering their shared energy, preparing for what they both knew had to come next. The crystal around her neck pulsed with increasing brightness, its light now visible even through her clothes. They had discovered that their connection wasn't just a phenomenon to be studied. It was a door opening to a new stage of evolution. And sometimes, for a door to open fully, something had to break. "Ready?" Nixon's consciousness asked, his presence warm and sure against her mind. "Ready," she responded, their frequencies aligning with perfect precision. The containment fields wouldn't hold them much longer, but what came next would either bridge the gap between their worlds or tear them apart forever. As the quantum resonance built around them, Thalia and Nixon prepared to show both their peoples what true connection meant, not through words or data, but through an experience that would change everything. The moment of transformation began with a whisper of quantum energy. As Thalia and Nixon synchronized their consciousness perfectly, the containment fields surrounding them began to sing, a pure note that resonated through the facility's very foundations. Julian's instruments exploded with data as the quantum field they generated expanded exponentially. "This is incredible," he breathed, watching as patterns of light danced across his screens. "The field is becoming self-sustaining, creating new quantum states faster than we can measure them." Through their merged consciousness, Thalia and Nixon guided the growing resonance. They had discovered that their connection wasn't just a bridge between two minds, it was a template, a key that could unlock the dormant potential for connection in others. Dr. Marcus stumbled, catching himself against a console as the field washed over him. His eyes widened as, for the first time, he felt the edge of what Thalia and Nixon shared. "This is... I can feel." "Everything," Thalia finished, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Every consciousness, every perspective, every possibility." The quantum resonance spread through the facility like ripples in a pond, touching each person it encountered with a gentle awakening. Security officers lowered their weapons, scientists dropped their instruments, all of them caught in a moment of profound connection. Through their shared awareness, Thalia and Nixon felt the impact of what they'd begun. Each mind touched by their resonance became a new note in an expanding symphony of consciousness. Not overwhelmed or controlled, but awakened to the possibility of deeper connection. Julian's hands flew over his controls, tracking the spread of the phenomenon. "It's not just affecting humans," he reported, wonder in his voice. "The field is reaching the Etherian ships in orbit. Their quantum signatures are starting to synchronize with the resonance pattern." In space, the crystalline Etherian vessels began to pulse with new light, their crews experiencing the first touch of a connection that transcended their careful conditioning. The rigid barriers of their society trembled as they felt, for the first time, the possibility of harmony with another species. "Now comes the difficult part," Nixon's thoughts whispered through their bond. Together, they reached out to all the minds touched by their resonance, offering not control or dominance but a choice. "We can't force this connection on anyone," Thalia said, her words carried on waves of quantum energy. "But we can show them what's possible, what we could all become together." Through their shared consciousness, they offered glimpses of what they had discovered. The beauty of minds learning to dance together, the power of understanding that ran deeper than words, the possibility of evolution guided by connection rather than competition. The response began slowly, a security officer lowering his barriers, a scientist opening her mind to new possibilities, an Etherian diplomat allowing himself to feel the full potential of connection with another species. Each choice created new harmonies in the growing quantum field, strengthening the bridge between worlds. Dr. Marcus straightened, his eyes clear as he looked at Thalia and Nixon. "The governments will try to stop this," he said, but his voice held no threat now. "They'll be afraid of what it means." "They already are afraid," Thalia answered, feeling Nixon's agreement flow through her. But fear can't survive true understanding. That's what we've learned. Above the facility, the Etherian ships began to descend, their crystalline structures resonating with the same frequencies that filled the air below. The High Council's demands for Nixon's return faded as new connections formed, as rigid hierarchies gave way to the possibility of true communion between species. Julian's instruments continued to record the spread of the quantum field, but the numbers meant less now than the feeling that filled the air, a sense of barriers falling, of minds opening to each other across the artificial boundaries of species and space. "What happens now?" someone asked, their voice carrying both hope and uncertainty. Through their combined consciousness, Thalia and Nixon saw the path forward, not a single future, but a symphony of possibilities, each choice creating new harmonies in the quantum dance of awareness. "Now," Thalia said, feeling Nixon's thoughts merge perfectly with her own, "we learn to grow together, to evolve not through isolation or control, but through connection, through understanding." The crystal around her neck pulsed one final time before its light seemed to merge with the air itself, becoming part of the new quantum field that surrounded them all. The resonance that had begun with a single touch now filled the space between stars, offering both their species a chance to become something greater than they had imagined. In the end, it wasn't science or diplomacy that bridged the gap between worlds. It was the simple, profound power of consciousness reaching out to consciousness, of hearts learning to beat in harmony across the boundaries of space and form. As the sun set on a day that had changed everything, Thalia and Nixon's connection hummed with the promise of what was to come. Not an ending, but a beginning, a new movement in the eternal dance of evolution and awareness. Their love had opened a door that could never truly close, showing both their peoples that the greatest frontiers weren't in space, but in the infinite possibilities of connected consciousness. And in that connection, they had found not just each other, but the future their species had been reaching for all along.